We're joined now by former Secretary of State and our Senior Counsel for Global Affairs, Secretary Mike Pompeo. Secretary Pompeo, I want to get right to it. So we saw the Biden administration. They have actually renewed taking some advice that you've been talking about, a lot of people have been talking, which is this idea of, hey, if you put back in place the former administration's rules and regulations as it came to the border, things would be better. You've created this, they've allowed this crisis to continue, but they have started to rely on Title 42 of the U.S. Code, which allows the federal government to expel migrants due to COVID concerns. At the same time, we know that there was a record high, Secretary Pompeo, of nearly 190,000 people that they had encounters with. That's what they know that they've had encounters with. Do you think that the administration will stick to their guns here, actually implement the Title 42 power that they have, or is it too little too late?
Well, Jordan, America's health and security both depend on them actually executing what they've now said they're going to do. Look, I always want to give credit where it's due. If they've now gotten it right and said that they're going to reinstate that part of the policy that our administration had, I'm happy about that. It's all about implementation, because folks will see very quickly as they're coming up, they will call their friends and they'll say, yeah, they actually said it, but they're not enforcing it, and then the onslaught will continue. This matters an awful lot. We can't have people who are coming in who have COVID while we're setting up a different set of rules and constructs here inside the United States for Americans. It makes no sense. My last thought there, Jordan, is, we talk about them going back to the policies we had. This is just a fraction of the work that we had done. They need to go back to all of the policies that we had in place, all the ones that had turned the spigot off. You talked about these record numbers. This wouldn't have happened if they would have just stayed the course, treated people humanely, stopped this terrible human crisis of these people crossing this desert, especially in the peak heat of the summertime. Remain in Mexico, a good policy on asylum, a set of rules about people who are coming here who may well be contagious. All of those form an umbrella that had truly gotten control of our southern border for an awfully long time. They ripped the Band-Aid off, and the United States is now suffering for that.
I want to follow up on that, Mike, because one of the things I'm concerned about, you look at 42 U.S.C. Section 265. So this is the federal code, folks, that is the provision that the Biden administration is now utilizing, which was put in place by the previous administration, which, of course, Mike Pompeo served as Secretary of State as well as a director of the CIA. And the section is entitled Suspension of Entries and Imports from Designated Places to Prevent the Spread of Communicable Diseases. Obviously, we're talking about COVID there. Now, the ACLU has already said that they are going to bring litigation, file a lawsuit as soon as the policy is implemented. And then my concern is, as you said about implementation, my concern is about the defense of that policy, because that will now be defended by the Department of Justice, who I suspect the sympathies lie with the ACLU.
Jay, it's a real risk. Of course, there'll be litigation. There was litigation about nearly every immigration policy that we set forth early on. We had district courts grant injunctions. We had the Ninth Circuit do some things that were, frankly, inconsistent with the Constitution. But nonetheless, those were things that held up our policy. I am confident those lawsuits will be filed, if they already haven't been, in very short order. And it will take a DOJ that is prepared to go actually defend what is absolute common sense, yes. Jay, right? Like, people with communicable diseases shouldn't be admitted to the United States. Who can disagree with this?
Well, the fact of the matter, you're right, it is common sense. And it's been also immigration policy since my grandfather came over to the United States in 1914. They say they check for the same things. I mean, this is not some new policy in one sense. I will tell you this, though. The ACLU said they're going to file suit. We know they will. We've already authorized our team at the American Center for Law and Justice, the team that you're a part of, the ACLJ, to enter a brief in support of the enforcement of Title 42, because I want to be able to bolster whatever the Department of Justice puts in place here.
That makes great sense, and it'll be really important, and your voice will be heard, and the judge or series of judges who hear those cases will need that voice. If the DOJ doesn't make all the right arguments, doesn't defend this as both constitutional, consistent with U.S. law, and common sense, I'm counting on others, and the ACLJ will be a big part of this to make sure that those voices are heard and the arguments made.
Secretary Pompeo, you referenced this before. We're still dealing with this in our own country. The world is still dealing with this. The House Foreign Affairs Committee, the Republicans in the House Foreign Committees, they released their report in which they conclude, similar to a report out of the State Department, that the virus leaked from the lab in Wuhan, that is the leading theory. It's something you've discussed for a long time that you have said is the leading theory. I think we're all starting to see now, as this is, we're starting to see the second round and the country trying to figure out what to do next, how serious this virus is, and the way it attacks people, how serious it is. But yet, again, the public pressure would be to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable, but the Democrats on the committee said they wouldn't even be involved in looking into this because they want to wait for an intel community report out of the Biden administration. I don't mind other reports on this as long as they're not politically motivated, but I am concerned that the administration, regardless of whatever the conclusions are, won't actually hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable.
Well, Jordan, two thoughts. One, first, it's really sad to see Democrats, duly elected Democrats in the House of Representatives, unwilling to at least opine. If you disagree, make the case for why you disagree. But of course, they don't disagree. It's now commonly understood that the most likely place that this virus came from was this laboratory, the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And I think the Democrats know that, and so they're playing political games, trying to satisfy someone. I couldn't tell you who. Maybe it's the Chinese Communist Party itself. Second, with respect to accountability, and this is an even more important question, although the question of origin matters a lot more important. Whether it came from the lab or somebody who ate a bat, the Chinese Communist Party knew they had a contagious virus. They knew the virus was pretty lethal, and they sent people, thousands and thousands of people all across the world, knowingly, recklessly, to infect people and kill people all across the world. That accountability has to happen no matter where that virus came from. We know it came from Wuhan. And I pray that this administration will be serious about this. This is if you'd killed several million people around the world through any other mechanism, I promise you there would be accountability and nations would respond. The whole world needs to unite and make the Chinese Communist Party pay the price for the damage they've done across the world.
Mike, if you were president of the United States, how would you hold them accountable?
I'd start with there's lots of things you could start with. You can start with sanctioning every decision maker. Their wives like to shop in America. We should stop that. Their kids want to study in America. We should stop that. We shouldn't attend an Olympics where they're not only foisted this virus, but now conducting genocide. There are things we can do that are connected to more kinetic activity as well that would send a message that says this is not going to be free for you. And finally, there are Chinese assets all around the world that I am confident that there are legal theories we can get to them. And we should go recover at least some of the hundreds of billions of dollars in economic wealth destruction that took place all across the world.
You know, you mentioned the human rights abuses of China, which are unfortunately legendary. We're still dealing with a case involving a pastor who is a Chinese citizen, but was here on American green card. Wife and family, the kids are all Americans, and he's been detained now for 3 years, Pastor John Saul. And the tragedy of this case is with China is their non-response, even when we go to the UN, to the Committee on Unlawful Detentions, and get rulings that say China should release Pastor Saul. And, of course, we don't have the access that we had when you were the Secretary of State in the previous administration, but you would think, I would hope, that the administration would still be concerned about the human rights abuses going on in China because they are outrageous. The religious freedom, lack of religious freedom there is legendary.
Well, Jay, they started off on the right foot with Secretary Blinken confirming the genocide that's taking place in China and its ongoing nature early on in the administration, but they've not taken the action necessary to defend that, to back that up. Your point about detention, wrongful detention of Americans, they're also holding Canadians, they're holding others. This is a rogue regime that is not a rights-respecting regime, and I regret that the Biden administration hasn't placed religious freedom at the same priority that we did in the Trump administration, and instead has elevated climate change to their number one priority when they have conversations with the Chinese Communist Party.
It's incredible to me, but I just want to say a huge thank you for your service and your continued service and working with us.